r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. What was the moment you realized that you shouldn't have showed up to a date? When he bit my forearm really hard after smelling the perfume on my wrist. When she told me my English accent was dumb, and then repeatedly shouted out that everyone else in the bar had a dumb English accent. For your information, it was a bar in England. An alleged friend told me her co-worker and I would be great together and wanted to do a double date at a festival with her and her husband. Date suggested he and I meet up the night before to get to know each other, and I suggested a gaming bar I'd wanted to try. Date time arrives and he's not there. He finally shows up and tells me he had to stop home to let the dogs out so they don't shit all over the floor. He then proceeds to show me a picture of a floor covered in dog shit and says guess it didn't work. He is still wearing his work clothes. It has been 3 hours since work ended and he went home to deal with the dogs but didn't change. He proceeds to eat the rest of the charcuterie plate I ordered by himself and then orders wings for himself. We decide to check out a game since I have now paid for more game time. He wants a Mall Madness game that is not designed for 2 people. We settle on a playable game. It's not great. As we are wrapping up, he tells me the last date he took here screwed him in the parking lot. He stares at me expertly. I tell him that's not going to happen. I tell my friend I'm skipping the festival. He's shocked and thought we had a spark. I was supposed to pick him up at his bed and breakfast so we could go out for dinner and drinks. Turns out the Airbnb was actually his parents' house. I thought it was weird that he lied about where he was staying but figured he was just embarrassed, so I didn't make a big deal about it. When I suggested a place I wanted to go for dinner, he told me his parents made dinner so he wanted to stay there to eat and go out for drinks after. I felt super awkward about having dinner with his family on our first date, but it got worse. He made me a plate of food and had me sit at a table in the garage and told me he'd be right back. Then he went inside and had dinner with his whole family while I sat alone in the garage. I wish I could say I noped out of there, but unfortunately I stuck it out for the worst date night of my life. I went on a date a few months after me and my college girlfriend had broken up. I had matched with this girl off of Tinder and we messaged a bit, but she was relentless about wanting to know more about my ex and how I felt after the breakup. I looked past this and met her for dinner a couple nights later. I walked in the restaurant and my ex is sitting at the table under that girl's name. I turned around to walk out and got a Tinder notification from the girl I had agreed to meet. You'll never be able to get away from me. Should have stayed home that night and steer clear of blind dates. When at the party I met her at and her boyfriend said, "Go ahead, take her. I'm sick of her BS." When his phone home screen and screensaver was of his ex-girlfriend. When he said he was actually from an entirely different state, looked completely different from his photos, and then asked if he could borrow $400 for methadone before he even ordered. I left immediately. Been stalking me for over 10 years. Fun times. She was a kleptomaniac. Thought she was exaggerating or maybe just went through a tough time. Then she showed me the pile of legal paperwork. She was on first name terms with the judge. She had been to court so many times. Then she asked me to touch her back. Said she felt super sweaty from the MC-80 she'd taken, and then showed me how she disposed of her used needles because she was a heroin addict. Should have noped out sooner, but she was sweet, but yeah. She needed a therapist, not a boyfriend. I went to his house to play Magic after beating him at my LGS a couple times. Excused myself to pee, and as I was peeing, he stood outside of the bathroom door and did an awful impression of the Joker laugh while saying he's been waiting for someone like me and other extremely creepy phrases about how I am perfect for him. The post-peeing bathroom exit was so absolutely awkward. Riddled with me saying several different versions of, "Oh wow, that was a great Joker impression, haha." And him continuing to speak like the Joker. It was the longest, most tense, fearful walk down the stairs. I left shortly after that. It still tortures me. I didn't show up for this date, but was always super proud I trusted my intuition. Had a date scheduled with a guy at a nice place downtown that I had agreed to. Right before the date he leaves me a message, "We're going to a different place." I look it up. And it's a dive bar out in the middle of nowhere. Like in a field. Alarm bells started going off. I actually really liked the guy and went back and forth with myself before I call the guy back and get his voicemail. So I leave a message apologizing profusely, but I need to reschedule the date. And I'd like to pick the place this time. Alarm bells are still going off and I end up letting his return call go to voicemail. I'm glad I do because I had to listen to it twice to believe it. This grown man proceeds to scream at me, calling me every name in the book. Calling me a bitch and stupid whore. Telling me how I missed out on the best date with best guy of my life. And then proceeds to tell me how he would have made me squirt all over that very night. I hadn't even been remotely sexual with him, so the squirting comment came completely out of left field. That was the most happy I'd been. I went with my gut and skipped out on a first date. Had a great time at dinner and went for a walk through a park afterwards. We're walking along and talking and she mentions to me that she is still technically engaged to a guy, but she was only marrying him because he had gotten her pregnant. But she had had a miscarriage a few days ago, had not told him yet, and now that there was no baby and she had met me, she was going to tell him and break up with him. There was no second date. When she told me she wanted to dine and dash, pretty much as soon as we ordered drinks. 10 minutes in and he was checking out the two women at the table next to us. Like hardcore staring and peeking around the booth wall until they looked at him uncomfortably. Lol. Was using a dating app and this woman had messaged me first and we had a few great conversations. She was listed at 35. She suggested that we meet up, have a meal and then see where things go. I show up to her place to pick her up and as I am waiting, a 65-year-old woman approaches my car. She introduces herself and I ask her how old she is and she says 35. I ask to see her ID. She declines and she insists we go get a meal. I politely tell her that the start of any friendship or relationship needs honesty and I would kindly like to know her age as it is obvious she is not 35. Keep saying she's 35. As we are driving, I am going in circles, under the pretext of going to a restaurant. I ask about her life and she gets interrupted by a phone call she must take as it is from work. She asks for me to pull over to let her talk. I do. She doesn't exit the vehicle. I was very close to leaving on the side of the street. She works as phone psychic. And I sit there listening to her faking it to lady who sounds like she is in need of help, explaining they pay $9.99 the first minute of which she makes $5 and $2 every minute of which she makes $1. After her call ends she says easy $12. So, I resume driving. Now headed back to her place, which she doesn't realize, and I continue asking her about herself. She drops that she has a son that's 31. I break as I start laughing and say, "So you gave birth at 4? She starts mumbling about how she misspoke, but I pulled up in front of her building and politely asked her to exit the vehicle as dishonesty is a deal breaker. That time when I walked into the restaurant where I was meeting that doctor I met online, and he was there wearing a white lab coat. To dinner. Our first and last date. Yes. Hello. It is I, medical doctor date guy. You can tell by the doctor coat I am wearing." She pulled out her iPad and starts trying to sell me insurance. When she told me she believed she was the reincarnation of 17th century pirate and Bonnie and was completely serious about it. When she tried to get me in a fight with a stranger. I think she knew the guy. Long story, but I think what she did was an attempt to get him to assault me. She was nuts. Dude, what? Was this supposed to be a test if you're man enough or something? Drove 50 minutes to her small town to watch a movie. Turns out she meant at her place, and it was a sequel to a trilogy I had never started. She was pretty awkward, which was fine, but then she started really oversharing, saying she was a crack baby, and telling me all her trauma. That was the point I knew it was a mistake, considering she had fibbed her way into the date. By the end of the night she was telling me she loved me. I left shortly after that and I let her down over text once I was home. Cherry on top. She got pregnant 3 months later from her boyfriend of 5 months. When he asked me out and I said yes, he then asked if I'd like to go to dinner and what kind of food I liked. I said anything but sushi. He took me to a sushi place. Said he thought he'd be able to change my mind. She brought her ex-boyfriend to see if he approved. After he said that, they asked for a three-way. This was not ever mentioned before the date. I was under the impression we were meeting one-on-one. I picked her up and she said let's hurry up and go. My husband will be back soon. Don't worry, we're getting divorced, but he won't want to see me on a date. That's a big press X'd out moment. Edit. Over 7k upvotes. People really like this one, lol. I waited on the park bench next to a girl for about 30 minutes after the agreed upon time. Turns out I was sitting next to my date the entire time. I just didn't recognize her because she was at least 200 pounds bigger than any of her pictures with no similarities. Turns out her much more attractive friend was trying to help her out by making a Tinder profile, using her own pictures, doing the matching and flirting, and then letting her less attractive friend actually do the meetings. Dating is freaking nuts. When I waited at the restaurant longer than I like to admit, I called him asking if he was on his way and he said yes. When he finally showed up, he told me he had just gotten to the gym when I called. It was just a bad night. I showed up and her best friend was there that I hadn't been warned was coming with us. Then her brother showed up. Then her dad showed up. Then her mom and her 3 cousins aged 3 to 5 showed up. That was the point I excused myself to bathroom. Thankfully this is one of those places where the employees will sneak you out if you're having a bad day to need an out, and apparently I'm the first guy they snuck out at that point. When I watched her crash into a parked car and not leave a note. Actions speak louder than words. She was a registered nurse and told me she knew 3 ways of killing someone that would leave absolutely no trace whatsoever. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.